Hi guys, Michael here. So, a few weeks ago I published a video talking about the recent Soyuz launch failure. I talked about what we knew at the time and what it meant going forward and did a little bit of analysis on what might have gone wrong. It's been a few weeks and Russia has come out with the results of their investigation and we know what happened. So I thought I could go through what has happened since, what do we know now, and explain all of that using some Kerbal space program. So, let's get to it. So before we could talk about what went wrong, we first have to talk about what it looks like when a Soyuz launches properly. So for those reasons, I have built a rough mock-up of the Soyuz in Kerbal space program. And if we launch it, we can see roughly what the Soyuz is supposed to look like on a normal mission. So here we're going to go, and now that it's loaded, we're going to go ahead and launch this. Now, as you can see, it doesn't look very much like a real Soyuz, but it is designed to function in a very similar way. Most specifically in the attachment of the boosters. On the real Soyuz, the boosters are attached both at the bottom and at the top, and at the top they are attached via a hinge. At booster separation, the engines are still producing a minute amount of thrust. Unfortunately, in Kerbal, that is not able to be replicated, so instead I have added a few solid rocket motors that will replicate the effect. Also, I have attached a rocket motor up at the nose to replicate the oxygen vent valve. When the Soyuz boosters separate, like I said, there is a minute amount of thrust in the engines. The booster separates at the base first, and that minute amount of thrust causes the booster to pitch forward about this nose. At the point that the engine finally shuts down, the thrust difference between the booster and the core is enough that the booster falls backwards out of the hinge at the nose. At that point, a sensor detects the separation and opens a valve in the booster. That valve produces thrust, which then pushes the nose of the booster away from the core, preventing them from recontacting each other. If we let this play out in Kerbal, we can see what that would look like on an actual flight. What's also worth noticing is on the Soyuz mission, the escape tower jettisoned shortly before booster separation. As you can see, the back pitched out first, followed by the separation and firing of these rocket motors, gracefully pushing those boosters away. Shortly later, the launch shroud would be jettisoned, exposing the Soyuz spacecraft, and the whole vehicle would continue on to orbit. Now, if we jump back to the ground and relaunch it, we can look at what happened in this failure. Normal launch went exactly the same. The vehicle lifted off perfectly from the pad, on schedule, and flew just fine up to booster separation. After the failure, Russia immediately launched an investigation into what went wrong, and luckily they were able to recover the booster that failed to separate. It was immediately known that the problem was most likely a failed booster separation. The question was, why did it fail to separate? In the subsequent investigation, they recovered the failed booster and were able to look it over and see if there was any damage that would have occurred before the launch. And they found some. The sensor in the nose of the failed booster had a bent component. That bent pin prevented that sensor from detecting booster separation. As a result, when that booster separated, it never sent the command to the oxygen vent valve to open. As a result, the oxygen never vented and never pushed the nose away from the core, thus causing a recontact. We can replicate that here in Kerbal by simply changing the staging so that the motors replicating that vent never fire. So as we come up on booster separation, we can see exactly how that went wrong. Also worth noticing is that the launch escape tower, the primary launch escape tower, this massive solid rocket motor up top, separated before the booster separation occurred, and thus it was not used in the abort scenario. So we will jettison it right about now, and now we will wait for the booster separation, which should occur right about now. And as you can see, without that vent firing, that nose comes back and recontacts the booster, which would have disintegrated, causing an immediate abort. The abort would have been fired by the upper shroud, where another series of abort motors are located. Afterwards, the descent module from the Soyuz would have separated and gone into a ballistic re-entry. On re-entry, the descent module from the Soyuz actually encountered 6 Gs as a result of the high energy abort. It's not as bad as previous aborts back in the 1970s, in which case the crew was exposed to a massive 21 Gs on re-entry. The 2 crew members on this mission were lucky enough to get away with only 6 Gs, which were, while not comfortable, not dangerous. The parachutes safely deployed on schedule, and the Soyuz safely landed back in Kazakhstan roughly under an hour after launch. I don't remember the exact time to landing, but it was a while. It takes a while to fall out of the sky. So as you can see, our 2 Kerbals here have safely survived this launch anomaly. One thing worth noting is in that simulated abort scenario in Kerbal, this core did not explode and the engine continued firing. It is worth noting why the failure occurred in the actual scenario. And that is the fact that in Kerbal, these tanks are a lot more robust than in real life. In actual aerospace design, everything comes down to weight. The heavier the rocket, the heavier the payload, the bigger the rocket you need to put it in space. The bigger the rocket, the more fuel you need. The more fuel you need, the bigger the rocket, and so on. Everything adds up, and if you add just another pound, everything gets massively bigger and more expensive. So as a result, fuel tanks are designed to be as light as possible. And to do that, the tank is actually pressurized. It acts like a balloon. By pressurizing the tank, the rigidity provides extra structural support, and thus the tank could be made thinner and lighter. A good example is a soda can. If you ever take a soda can, before you open it, try squeezing it. It will actually be very hard and not possible to compress, because it is pressurized, and that internal pressure is pushing outward against atmospheric pressure, and thus makes the can very, very rigid. But once you crack the top, you can easily squish those cans because they're very thin and very light. A rocket's fuel tank is just the same. When pressurized, they are very strong and strong enough to support the entire rocket. But if you have the side of a rocket booster slam into the side and rupture it, the whole thing will basically pop like a balloon. It will disintegrate catastrophically and be useless. The entire thing will literally rip itself apart. After the investigation, Russia released the onboard footage of the failure, and you can clearly see the booster vent valve never fired, the booster never pitched away like its other 3 counterparts, and when it recontacted the center core, the entire thing disintegrated catastrophically. I know this was a fairly short video compared to some of my others. I just wanted to provide a follow-up to my previous video and explain to you guys what happened to that Soyuz mission and what we know now. And I thought Kerbal Space Program would be an easy way to explain exactly how it worked and what went wrong. So with that, I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you guys are, well informed as to what happened to that Soyuz. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you enjoyed, please share it with your friends if you think they too want to know what happened to the Soyuz vehicle. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. I have a lot of other space-related videos coming out in the near future, so stick around for those. With that, thanks for watching. My name is Michael. I'll see you next time.